Welcome back, traveler, to the sleepy Antiquary. Tonight, our journey takes us deep into the silent, ancient olive groves of Greece, back to the year 1892. We follow the real story of an elderly historian named Professor Nicholas, who discovered a hidden underground vault containing the untouched marble archives of the lost Temple Kings. Settle comfortably into your blankets and let the quiet, ancient mysteries of Nicholas's discovery carry you away into a deep, restful sleep. In the quiet, blue midnight of 1892, an old historian named Professor Nicholas stood before a hidden stone archway at the base of a Greek cliff. His silver hair was brushed back, and his face bore the calm patience of a man who had searched for this archive for 40 years. In his right hand, he held a large, heavy iron key, intricately shaped like an ancient laurel branch. He inserted the metal key into the central keyhole and turned it slowly until a heavy, satisfying click echoed from inside. The ancient stone door began to slide open, revealing a hidden pathway. Nicholas picked up his polished brass oil lantern and took his first slow steps into the subterranean chamber. The air inside was perfectly warm, dry, and completely still, untouched by the outer world for centuries. The floor beneath his sturdy leather boots was composed of dark, polished white marble slabs laid out in a geometric grid. As he walked forward, his boots made a soft, muffled thud that emphasized the absolute silence of the sanctuary. He raised the lantern high, watching the warm light steadily push the ancient shadows away from the entry walls. Standing neatly along the left wall was a long row of dark cedar wood shelves, carved with ancient geometric patterns. Resting on these shelves were hundreds of unique artifacts known as terracotta scrolls, recorded archives of the Lost Temple. Each archive consisted of a thick main parchment made of dark linen, from which dozens of lead seals hung down in perfect order. Nicholas walked over slowly and gently ran his wrinkled fingers over the smooth surface of the first scroll container. The systematic arrangement of the archive gave the silent room a profound sense of historical structure. Nicholas placed his lantern securely on a nearby stone block and reached for a small silver pointer from his pocket. With a slow, deliberate movement, he approached a central display case made of thick stone and glass. He carefully removed the linen protective wrapper covering an ancient bronze manuscript plate. The linen fabric gave a faint, soft rustle in the quiet room as it dropped away onto the wooden tray. He worked with complete patience, ensuring every gesture was steady, unhurried, and perfectly balanced. Inside the stone container lay a thin, heavy sheet of beaten bronze, covered in hundreds of tiny stamped glyphs. Nicholas lifted the bronze plate with the utmost care, holding its smooth edges in his gloved palms. The surface caught the warm light of the oil lamp, reflecting a beautiful, rich amber glow onto the surrounding dark walls. The stamped symbols detailed the historical trade records of the ancient mountain cities from a forgotten century. The plate sat steady in his hands, a permanent library of truth. Resting next to the bronze plate was a small, heavy, circular disc representing the ancient sun deity. It was crafted from solid silver and inlaid with vibrant blue lapis lazuli and gold wires. Nicholas lifted the artifact, feeling the cool weight of the metal and the smooth texture of blue stones. The silver lines caught the faint reflection of the lamp flame, gleaming quietly in the deep shadows of the desk. He placed it gently on a velvet cloth, accepting its stable, grounding presence in the vault. Nicholas turned his attention to the grand wall behind the workbench, which was entirely carved with a relief of a majestic owl. The animal was depicted in a resting posture, its form cut deeply into the solid white marble stone. He held his lantern close to the carving, watching the shadows of the stone wings stretch and change on the wall. The ancient sculptor had given the owl a look of complete calmness and infinite protection. The stone beast stood as an unchanging guardian over the archives for centuries. In the center of the archive vault stood a low, heavy research desk made of solid walnut timber. It was a sturdy piece of furniture that Nicholas had brought up the mountain passes piece by piece. The dark wood was beautifully polished, its surface smooth and dark, like a still mountain lake at midnight. Nicholas sat down on a comfortable wooden bench before the desk, resting his arms on the wide timber edge. The desk sat completely motionless, a private island of total security and quiet purpose. Sitting on the right corner of the walnut desk was a small, heavy inkstand cast from solid silver. Inside the well, a pool of fresh black ink sat perfectly still, reflecting a tiny point of candlelight. Next to it lay a classic steel-nibbed dip pen with a dark cedar handle, polished from years of record-keeping. Nicholas picked up the pen gently, enjoying the familiar balance of the wood between his fingers. The silver stand sat in its designated place, a small testament to order and clarity. Hanging from a sturdy iron bracket on the wall was a small set of balancing scales used to verify the weight of metal plates. The two small brass pans hung perfectly even and still, balanced to the exact fraction of a grain. Nicholas turned his gaze toward it through the dim shadows, appreciating its absolute equilibrium. The scale required no further adjustment tonight. Its measurements were complete and permanent. The sight of the balanced brass added to the heavy, reassuring stillness of the room. On the velvet cloth next to the sun disk lay a small, sharp knife carved from solid green jade stone. The polished jade was smooth and dark, reflecting a single, sharp line of amber light from the lantern. Nicholas picked it up gently, running his thumb safely along the polished flat side of the blade. It was a tool used by ancient scribes to trim the edges of linen parchment. It felt cold, heavy, and completely stable in his hand, a beautiful piece of ancient utility resting in the absolute quiet. Against the right wall stood a massive chest made of old mahogany wood, bound with thick bronze straps. Nicholas walked over slowly, his boots making that familiar, soft thud on the floor. He unlatched the heavy bronze lock, which opened with a deep, hollow sound that quickly dissolved into the silence. Inside, rows of small terracotta tablets were arranged in neat wooden slots, completely untouched by time. The scent of old mahogany wood filled the immediate air, adding a rich, grounding comfort to the chamber. Nicholas lifted the first clay tablet from its mahogany slot, holding its rough, square edges with absolute care. The surface was dry and pale brown, covered in fine, incised geometric lines representing the ancient star alignments. He carried it slowly to the walnut desk, placing it flat on the smooth timber surface next to his silver inkstand. Every mark on the clay was a fragment of a calendar system that had regulated life for centuries. The solid weight of the clay felt deeply reassuring against his palms. Resting on a high stone ledge was a small, solid silver statue shaped like a Doric column. It was an ancient boundary marker used by the temple to define the sacred limits of the valley archives. Nicholas reached up slowly, lifted the silver object, and placed it under the warm glow of his lantern. The polished metal surface was cool and smooth, reflecting a soft, watery gold light onto his silver hair. It stood perfectly level, a heavy symbol of permanent order and historical boundaries. Nicholas pulled a heavy gold pocket watch from his vest pocket and laid it gently on the walnut desk. With a slow, regular rotation of his thumb and forefinger, he began to wind the mechanical crown. The internal gears responded with a steady, quiet click-click sound that filled the silent vault. The watch began its heavy, regular tick-tock, measuring the night with a slow cadence that matched the calm pulse of the room. It was a comforting, familiar sound that anchored his thoughts in complete peace. Next to the mahogany chest sat a tall wicker basket containing several rolls of thick linen maps. Nicholas selected the central roll, which was tied with a simple piece of dark hemp twine. He carried it to the desk, untied the knot slowly, and unrolled the stiff fabric across the smooth wood. Painted in mineral pigments were the outlines of the ancient roads connecting the hidden vault to the temple ruins. The map lay perfectly flat, a beautiful masterwork of geography resting under his calm gaze. To hold the corners of the linen map flat, Nicholas placed a heavy, circular bronze compass on the top edge. The compass casing was dark and weathered, engraved with the classic navigation marks of his own student days. The heavy silver needle inside swung slowly back and forth before settling perfectly toward the absolute north. It was a reliable tool that had never failed him in all his decades of exploration across foreign lands. Its steady, unmoving needle brought a powerful sense of direction and certainty to the silent desk. On a small stone side table sat a simple white porcelain jar filled with pure mountain spring water. Nicholas reached for the jar, lifted it with both hands, and poured a small amount into a matching porcelain cup. The liquid moved with a clean, clear murmur that briefly broke the absolute silence of the room. He took a slow, quiet sip, enjoying the cold, neutral freshness that cleared his mind. He set the white cup down next to the compass, completely at peace with his simple comforts. Nicholas pulled his own heavy, leather-bound field journal toward the center of the desk. The dark brown hide was scuffed and worn at the corners from years of travel through historical sites. He opened the book slowly, the thick cream pages making a soft, satisfying rustle in the quiet air. He dipped his cedar-handled pen into the silver inkstand, preparing to record the ancient lines he had discovered. The act of writing was a familiar ritual that brought complete focus and structure to his mind. Along the upper stone ledge of the vault stood a neat row of 12 small terracotta urns. Each urn was uniform in shape, holding sample pigments of red ochre used by ancient artists. They sat perfectly still, their rough clay surfaces catching the faint warm reflections of the oil lamp. They were an organized library of color, preserved for centuries in the dry darkness of the mountain core. The neat, geometric symmetry of the row provided a visual calm to the dark upper boundary of the chamber. Nicholas leaned his head back against the high wooden chair and looked up at the stone ceiling rafters. Carved deeply into the central marble block was a massive relief of an ancient shield with geometric patterns. The ancient artist had given the shield a posture of complete majesty and eternal protection. As the oil lamp flame flickered slightly on the desk below, the shadows of the carving seemed to move lazily across the roof. The stone shield stood steady, a massive, unchanging guardian over the old historian's head. Lying flat along the map border was a 2-foot bronze ruler used to measure the layout of the ancient architecture. Its dark metal surface was engraved with fine divisions, polished smooth at the edges by decades of drafting. It held no active task tonight. Its numbers were static and still in the dim golden light. The bronze was cool to the touch, resting in a straight, unbending line along the walnut timber. The ruler lay as a silent standard of order, anchoring the desk in complete structural precision. Draped over the back of Nicholas's wooden bench was a heavy, hand-woven wool blanket dyed in dark indigo. He reached back and pulled the thick fabric over his shoulders, wrapping himself in its deep warmth. The dense fibers were incredibly comforting, sealing out the cool air of the subterranean vault. The blanket sat still around his chest, a physical reassurance of absolute security within the ancient stone walls. He took a long, peaceful breath, feeling completely protected in his private haven. To secure the loose pages of his journal, Nicholas placed a smooth, circular piece of polished jasper stone on the paper. The stone was dark green, with natural rings of deep red captured inside its core. It caught the direct light of the oil lamp, glowing like a warm ember on the cream-colored page. It held the paper down with a steady, permanent weight that required no further attention. The absolute stillness of the stone brought an additional sense of order to the working surface. On a clean piece of linen cloth lay a pair of fine bronze tweezers used to lift brittle fragments of linen documents. Their polished metal limbs were perfectly straight, resting in absolute symmetry next to the silver pointer. They possessed no tension and held no weight tonight. Their meticulous work finished hours ago. They shared the complete relaxation of the old man's fingers, sitting quietly on their white cloth bed. The sight of the organized tools brought a profound sense of completion to the desk. The brass oil lantern rested on a tall, square pedestal carved from solid gray stone. The stone block was heavy and immovable, anchored firmly into the marble floor of the vault. Its rough, chiseled surface absorbed the deep shadows, providing a completely stable platform for the light source. The lamp flame burned steadily atop the stone, casting a constant, breathing golden glow across the workspace. The absolute permanence of the pedestal brought a deep sense of structural security to the night. Next to the walnut desk sat a small mahogany box lined with deep crimson velvet fabric. Inside, several silver drawing instruments and measuring dividers lay in precise, fitted slots. Nicholas closed the lid of the box slowly, the small brass latch shutting with a soft, muffled click. The containment of the instruments marked the formal conclusion of his drafting work for the evening. The dark wooden box sat motionless, a neat archive of utility resting quietly in the lower shadow. Resting on the corner of the desk was a large, heavy seashell brought from the Aegean Sea centuries ago. Its outer surface was covered in rough, natural ridges, while the inside was polished smooth as porcelain. Nicholas ran his thumb over the smooth inner wall, feeling the cool, stable temperature of the marine artifact. It sat perfectly still, a beautiful piece of natural art preserved in the dry mountain air. Its presence brought a quiet, historical harmony to the dark walnut border. Next to the field journal, a simple bronze stand held Nicholas's favorite steel calligraphy pen. The black ink on the metal nib had dried completely, forming a silent, matte finish over the fine point. The pen stood perfectly upright, its dark wooden handle unmoving in the heavy, still air of the vault. No more notes would be recorded tonight, and no more lines translated into the archive. The pen remained at rest, its scientific duty fully completed for the day. Resting on a small tin tray was a small earthenware jar filled with clear oil used to preserve old leather logbooks. A small cork stopper was pressed firmly into the jar's neck, sealing the oil securely inside. A faint, warm scent of oil drifted subtly across the desk, adding a layer of antique comfort to the space. The jar was perfectly still, having no leather to smooth and no surfaces to oil tonight. It sat quietly in its designated slot, a simple tool resting in the shadows. Mounted on a leather strap across the stone wall was a neat row of 6 graduated bronze tools. Used by earlier scholars to clear away debris, each tool was placed in descending order of size. Their dark metal surfaces were clean and free from any stone dust or grit. They hung in a perfect geometric line, a silent library of tools that required no further attention. The meticulous organization provided a visual calm to the dark boundary of the room. On a high granite shelf sat a large circular mirror carved from a single piece of polished green jade stone. The smooth stone surface was dark and clean, completely devoid of any frame or ornament. It caught a very faint reflection of the distant oil lamp, its face holding the light like a deep pool of still water. The mirror created a perfect point of absolute stillness and visual quiet in the upper shadows of the vault. Nicholas looked toward it, pleased by its simple, permanent mystery. Opposite Nicholas's research bench stood a low cedar stool where his local assistant sat during the day. The circular wooden seat was polished smooth by weeks of quiet observation during the excavation. Tonight, it stood completely vacant, its 3 sturdy legs anchored firmly on the white marble slabs. There were no logistics to discuss and no maps to coordinate. The empty stool stood as a symbol of completed labor, resting quietly in the deep shadow. Inside the lower drawer of the walnut desk, a small wooden tray held a collection of unsorted pottery fragments. The ancient terracotta pieces were rough, waiting for analysis next season. They lay heavily upon one another, their combined weight solid and stable within the drawer space. There was no urgency to organize them tonight. Their secrets were safely contained behind the thick timber panel. Nicholas closed the drawer slowly, glad that his materials were secure. On the window ledge sat a heavy bronze mortar and pestle used to grind pigments for field sketches. The pestle rested quietly inside the thick bronze bowl, its rounded head perfectly still against the metal wall. A heavy stone ledge beneath the bowl was cool, absorbing the deep midnight air from the mountain vault. The tool was completely silent, having no stone to crush and no powder to mix. It sat as a solid block of dark metal, anchoring the window frame in absolute peace. A small oak box filled with neat squares of heavy paper labels sat near the inkstand. Nicholas used these clean tags to identify the specific shelves where each parchment scroll belonged. The bundles were tied neatly with simple twine, their edges clean and unmarked. They occupied their small corner of the workspace without movement, adding their clean scent to the air. The presence of the simple materials reinforced the complete order of the archive. On a clean linen cloth lay a pair of fine iron calipers, their measuring tips closed together in perfect alignment. They had measured the diameter of the bronze plates throughout the long day of documentation. Now, their polished iron limbs were cool, resting quietly in perfect symmetry on the white fabric. They possessed no tension and held no scale tonight. They shared the complete relaxation of the old man's hands resting quietly on their cloth bed. In the back corner of the vault sat a massive iron chest where Nicholas stored the most valuable silver artifacts. The thick metal doors were bound with heavy bolts, locked securely for the night. The chest was an immovable object, its immense weight grounding that corner of the room into the floor. It held the wealth of history within its walls, completely controlled and still. Nicholas felt a profound sense of comfort from its permanent, heavy presence in the dark. Lying flat along the edge of the workbench was a folding rule made of yellow boxwood wood and brass joints. It was fully extended, its engraved markings visible under the dim oil lamp glow. It measured nothing tonight. Its numbers were static and still in the dark. The brass hinge was cool, holding the two wooden arms in a straight, unbending line along the walnut border. The rule lay as a silent standard of measurement, resting quietly in the dark. The oil inside the brass lantern was reaching its natural end, and the flame began to soften. The bright golden light lost its sharpness, plunging the cedar shelves and the stone walls into deep shadow. The long shadows of the marble rafters grew larger, wrapping the entire archive in a dark, cozy embrace. The sharp details of the desk slowly blurred into a uniform, friendly darkness. Nicholas closed his journal, letting the soft shadows welcome his mind. On the middle desk drawer sat a small tin box filled with several spare bronze rings. Each ring was crafted securely, designed to hold the keys to the various storage containers in the vault. They lay tumbled together in a silent metallic pile, their shapes blurring in the deep shadow of the drawer. They had no locks to open tonight and no security to maintain. They rested quietly in their metal box, a collected archive of utility at peace. Placed neatly in a wooden basket were several squares of old linen cloth used to clear dust from the clay tablets. They were soft and clean, folded into precise squares by Nicholas before the evening began. They occupied their basket without movement, their white surfaces absorbing the soft shadows of the corner. They held no stains and required no attention tonight. They stood as a final touch of cleanliness and absolute order within the dark workspace. Hanging inside the main archive cabinet was a large stone counterbalance weight that operated the secret wall mechanism. It hung perfectly vertical from its thick rope, suspended 2 feet above the floor. Its dark, dull surface reflected no light, absorbing the complete shadow of the enclosure. It exerted a constant, silent downward pull, providing the steady potential energy that kept the vault secure. The permanence of its gravity brought a profound sense of stability to the night. Next to the field journal sat Nicholas's small pen case, made of pressed horn with silver hinges. The case was securely snapped shut, its smooth, dark surface reflecting a single dot of dying candlelight. Nicholas would not need to open it again until the morning light returned to the mountain pass. It sat as a small monument to the closure of sight and the formal beginning of rest. The simple presence of the closed case reinforced the absolute boundary of the working day. Finally, the old historian's story dissolved completely into the quiet Greek night. The hidden vault, the bronze plates, and the white marble shelves became one single dark void of absolute peace. There were no more glyphs to study and no more paths to trace. Only the steady, flat rhythm of the ancient mountain silence remained, guarding the deep, endless sleep of the archive. All is still, all is at rest,